we built our system with no user feedback. We haven't pivoted even once. You sometimes have to be kind of stern with your customers and say, hey, listen, you're telling me something that existed in a system that you didn't like. Why don't we just talk about the problem that you're looking to solve? And why don't we take that away and solve that problem for you?
I want to
Cheers.
give
Yeah,
you
cheers.
some bad advice. You heard it right. Bad advice.
I mean, economics, finance, it's very similar.
I did CS,
Same.
so I have no clue.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask a lot of questions about like, what is private lending? Hello, welcome to Bad Advice, where we talk to contrarian founders who are doing things very differently in their startups. I have Shaye with me today from Baseline, which is a startup that helps private lenders manage their operations. Baseline is currently at 10 people. They raised the seed round, and now they're looking to raise their A series.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks
I really
for having
appreciate
me.
it.
Yeah.
Super fun conversations. So I'd like to really start like right off the bat. Like what's a crazy thing you're doing in your startup that's different than most?
There's a few, but the one that I think comes up often is we built our system with no user feedback. We were a year and a half deep into the build, and we hadn't talked to any users. And yeah, I think when I tell people that, they think that's pretty nuts. That
One of the first things, if you research, like, okay, I'm starting a startup, like, it's like, okay, talk to users, talk to customers. So you skip that.
No, actually, interestingly, when we were maybe a year in, someone connected me with their with a friend of theirs who was also working on another startup, and this person's like a smart Ivy League grad, who undergrad Ivy League law school and had a JD MBA, overachiever for sure. And I was having lunch with him, and he asked me how many users I talked to, how many user stories I conducted before building, and I was like, well, how many have you done? Because he was working on a startup too. He's like, I've done about 85, and I've got a few more that I'm planning on doing. And I think at the time I just made up a number.
Maybe self-conscious, right?
I was like, I didn't want to make it seem like I was this idiot building a startup without conducting any user stories. So I just, I made up a number, but after that, I was obviously really worried. I was like, should I have conducted more user stories or any user stories? But no, you know what? I realize that that's conventional advice that people get is conducting user stories, but because of our history and background in the industry, I don't think it was as relevant to us.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that. Can you sort of give us a little background about yourself, Baseline, what was there before Baseline, and how you ended up with this idea and this startup?
We started Baseline as private lenders ourselves, and after canvassing the market for systems that will help us run a better private lending business, we came up short. We still ended up using some systems that did a little bit of the job, but we had to really piece them together and make them work.
So this is like an operating system for like private lenders, like a operational software?
Exactly.
Like their HubSpot, essentially, sort of? Or
yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know what analogy to use in terms of what it is, but it's kind of their command center. It's their central hub. It's their source of truth. Take whatever of those terms you want to use. Operating system.
Operating system is cool these days.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the one place you can go to manage all aspects of your business.
Mhm. Can you give me like a few examples? Like what would a private lender employee do in this system?
Yeah, so I mean, the loan process has different steps and different stages. So a loan has the origination aspect of it, which is the start of a loan, where you apply for a loan and someone is now, you've requested a loan or you've applied for a loan, and now the lender is doing their due diligence. And during that process, and that process is called origination. And so that's from the moment you request a loan to the moment where the loan is funded, where you receive the cash. And that process is very labor intensive and requires a lot of back and forth data collection from the lender's part, document collection, sharing information, payments. There's all these different aspects to it. Ultimately, it's like assembly of a lot of data and documents. That's kind of the core of it. And then there's a layer of payments and communications and a few other things that are involved in that process. So that's some lenders only focus on that, and then they go and either sell the loan, or because the loan effectively becomes an asset once it's been originated. Yeah. And so they either sell that loan or they keep it on their books, and now that loan moves into servicing. Okay, so the servicing is now the collection of payments, distributions, making sure taxes, if it's a real estate loan, a mortgage, taxes are paid.
Yeah.
And then there's one other part of it, which is the investor management. So raising capital for it, because a lot of, lenders raise capital to provide loans, because lenders are in a service business. They don't, if you go to a bank isn't using their retained earnings to make those loans. They're using deposits. So every lender has some capital source that they use to make loans.
Got it. And managing all that happens within your software.
Yeah, historically there have been different systems that do this, and the reason is, I don't know if we have time for the deep dive into the real estate or the mortgage lending industry or the real estate private lending industry, but the reason it's separate is because of regulation and just how the market is structured, where there's loan buyers and there's originators and there's brokers and there's servicers, because a lot of these loans get securitized, which is the concept of pooling loans and then selling them as bonds.
Got it.
And for mortgages, the U.S. government has these two entities called Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are government-sponsored entities that buy like 90% of all the loans in the U.S.
Wow.
So you have a lot of these originators who sell their loans to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but private lending is private lending is structured very differently.
Got it. So to go back to that conversation of not talking to potential users or customers, was it because you were managing this business and you saw the need directly and you were like, okay, I know what I need, there's no need to talk to anybody about it?
100%.
Yeah.
That was that, and that gave me some comfort. And then there's an investor who's part of the PayPal mafia, Keith Raboy.
Oh yeah.
Do you ever listen to him
on Twitter?
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember it wasn't too long ago. So, but well after that conversation that I had at lunch, where I felt insecure about not interviewing users, but I felt a little validated when he talked about, and I don't remember exactly what he said now, but it was something along the lines of when to conduct user stories and when to not.
Got it. Okay.
And in our case, it made sense that we didn't, because we understood the business so well
Yeah.
that we didn't really feel the need to conduct 85 user stories.
Can you share what he mentioned? Like, do you remember?
I don't remember, but I think it was something, and I may be misspeaking or misquoting him. So, but it was somewhere along the lines of if you're a B2C, a business to consumer startup, or if you're building a product for in B2C, then you should conduct user interviews because you're if you're building the next social network, then obviously you need to conduct user interviews and you need to understand how different people are going to interact and how people feel about a certain product or how they will feel about your product or your ideas. When you're building a B2B product, and if you're a domain expert, and in this case, we'd been running a private lending business for 8 years ourselves, and this is a product that we were building for ourselves. So we understood the problem at a pretty deep level. And so I don't know how much user interviews will have yielded for us.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone. Like, I'm thinking of products that are secretive, that are launched, like iPhone, like nobody knew it existed. One day everybody knew it existed. Like, it feels like maybe if you're like too visionary in that field, or you're very opinionated about what you need, like, I think it makes sense. I feel like I think I've done that with also notification API, which is like, I talked to a few friends if the problem exists, just to make sure I'm not like hallucinating the problem, but then the solution, I'm like super opinionated about how it should work. And never really went to ask. Yeah, I wonder, ask me in 10 years, I guess, if that was right. But,
So,
yeah. But sometimes I feel happy about that because there would be a lot of noise there, right? If you're just blindly collecting user feedback and like listening to everything everybody says, like, I feel like you have to be also very good at like sorting out the feedback in some way.
Well, now we do have users and we have hundreds of users and they do provide feedback and they have opinions.
Yeah, now we're drowning in feedback. Yeah.
Exactly. Even when we don't ask for it. No, but it's all good. They provide feedback, but something that we've learned to do is not take their feedback at face value, because when a user tells you something, they're going into their experience, so they're tapping into their field of experience and pulling from that. So they'll tell you, especially if they frame it like an opinion or like a suggestion, they'll tell you based on something that they've already used before or something
seen in a different software.
They've seen in a different software. And in our industry, what happens a lot is a lot of the tools that exist in our industry, they're very archaic. And so a lot of the opinions or suggestions we get are based on something that they've done before in a different system.
Let me guess, they want spreadsheets, right?
Well, in some form or another.
They want goals.
In some form or another, that's what they want. But you sometimes have to be kind of stern with your customers and say, hey, listen, you're telling me something that existed in a system that you didn't like. You came to us because you didn't like that system, yet you're now trying to impose that because it's a bad habit that you can't break. Why don't we just talk about the problem that you're looking to solve? And why don't we take that away and solve that problem for you? I have an example of this. We recently launched a feature which integrates users' emails. Okay, so they can send and receive emails out of Baseline, and they can they can tag the loan or the borrower or whichever party. So, essentially carries that metadata in the thread. And so it stays within the context of that loan. And so now they can send messages within the loan, receive messages, because, there's no denying email is a very powerful tool, and a lot of business gets done via email. And so you need email. You can't simply rely on just automatic notifications.
Yeah.
And you can't expect everyone to go to a dedicated portal every single time they need to send a message. So you have to have, so we built email, but when we were building email, a lot of customers asked for the ability to just send a message out of the system and send it to a third party. And they didn't care whether it was structured like an inbox that could receive emails. And turns out they're asking for this because, and this was multiple customers who were asking for, who came from different products. But what we realized was both of those products didn't have a true email integration where they were receiving messages. It was just outgoing messages.
Pushing out.
And so we're like, they don't even have the belief or the trust that we can do the other side of that for them. So they gave us this idea or suggestion that was based on a past experience, because they just didn't really believe that we could receive an email and keep it within the context of the loan.
That's pretty cool.
It just didn't cross their mind. So that's an example of where once we understood what the problem was, then we solved for the problem, and it was in a better way than they would have imagined. And the funny thing is, they all love it once you solve it and do it in a way that even if it's different than what they had imagined, because the trick is to just always deliver more than they ask for.
It reminds me of like Facebook or Twitter when they change their algorithms. Like, people hate it. But, it's this algorithm now bringing, cat pictures or whatever. But they're the experts at making you addicted to this platform.
Exactly.
Let them do their job. You're going to love it more.
Well, don't we all hate it when you're an Android user? I know that. I'm an iPhone user. And so when, they moved to the flat icons.
Yeah.
A little while ago.
It's a little disoriented at first, I guess.
Or I remember they used to have more space on top on the home screen that had all the battery and the Wi-Fi and, they had those bars and everything. So it was a different, it had more padding. And when they changed that, I remember I tend to be a bit sensitive to design. And I remember when they changed the padding, I was like, why would they do this? This is like I liked it when it had more padding. And then 3 days later, I forgot all about the padding. It was just like, oh yeah, they've optimized the space here.
Yeah, they probably know better.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. I want to ask about, so don't talk to your customers. That's a bad advice. Who would you give that advice to?
I think I'll probably just take the idea that I got from Keith Raboy, and hopefully I'm remembering that idea correctly. But
we'll have him on the podcast. Ask him himself.
Yeah. You'll really get an upgrade. But I think it's more for people who understand, are domain experts, understand their industry, understand the problem that they're solving. They probably don't need to, talk to too many users, because they might either get discouraged, or they might just not get the same. They might get too much noise, because everyone has different ideas, and it's not, if you have conviction, if you think you can execute it well, then just do it.
Got it. I also think it works for like founders who are okay going for like a very tiny niche. Like the way I think about it sometimes is that there's enough companies or people in the world that whatever you come up with, somebody will buy, like literally doesn't matter what it is. So if you're okay, like going super niche, whatever opinion you have, however you're going to implement it, probably has some customers if you can find them. If you're not worried too much about, the bigger scale.
Yeah.
So that's maybe another way to look at it if you really want to just go after like a very particular niche,
Yeah. I guess we're assuming that the founder in this case understands that niche or is at least somewhat aware of problems in that niche.
Yeah, like it's like, okay, I have this business issue, let's build a software for that. And let's say, out of 1,000 interviews, only one person is like finds that issue interesting and wants to solve that. I'm like, well, if you're happy with 1 out of 1,000, with that narrow like market penetration, then you're fine. Now that I guess goes back to like whether you phrase VC or not, like what scale you want to go after. But yeah, it could be very like a very niche solution to a very niche problem in a very particular way. And I think the world is just so big that somebody will like that, however you go about it.
Potentially.
Maybe that's not gonna be a business that
right. Yeah. Maybe it's not a money-making venture. But yeah, potentially. I mean, again, I would imagine that it's assuming you have, you really understand the problem at a deep level, because if you're new to the domain, if you're new to an area, then I think it's very difficult to understand problems at a meaningfully deep level. If I think that just always takes time, in my experience.
So who wouldn't you give this advice to?
To not users.
Who should do user interviews?
Who should do user interviews? I think if you don't have really high conviction on something, you're
okay pivoting or.
Yeah, like we haven't pivoted even once. Like even I'd say definitely at the big picture level, we haven't pivoted, and then also at the feature level or the product level. I actually don't really have that many examples of when we pivoted or when we decided that we were building the wrong thing or that we needed to. Obviously, we're always enhancing and improving things, but I don't think there's a single thing that we've built which has been a waste.
Have you pivoted on the target market, like smaller private lenders versus bigger ones or anything like that?
Not really.
Wow. Okay. That is impressive. My God. I don't know if I know anybody who hasn't pivoted on the product or the customer, how to reach them.
Maybe this is bad advice live.
Just go for it. Whatever you're doing.
Bad advice live.
That is so unique.
Don't
actually.
Pivot.
Don't pivot at all. Just do whatever you're doing. Yeah. It's gonna work out. Don't worry.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And how long was it until it started working out? Like from like ideation to seeing like users using it, roughly.
Well, we ran the lending business, so we knew that this was a problem that existed, at least for us. And at the very least, we would have used this product for our own lending business, Now, we eventually ended up shutting our lending business down to focus exclusively on the SaaS product. But we knew, because we had that confidence that we could use the product ourselves, we didn't really need to. We knew essentially right away that this is going to work. And then once we went to market and started having conversations with customers, I remember having conversations with customers before we even launched. Before we had initially, the version 1 of this product we had built for ourselves.
Oh, okay.
And so I started having conversations with customers, with my peers at the time. They weren't customers or prospects, with my peers, and anytime they'd look at it, they'd say, hey, if I'm ever interested in selling or licensing it to them, they'd be interested in buying. So I guess I knew to some degree that we had at least a few customers.
You were doing customer interviews before you had a startup.
Yeah, I guess I guess it was.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Yeah, just, it was, but in a very organic way.
Yeah.
And we didn't really set out to be a tech company. We, obviously there was an interest in it. Otherwise we probably wouldn't have done it. There was a need. There was a clear need that we saw. None of it felt forced. I often see where people leave what they're doing and because they want to do their own startup. And I think sometimes it works, but I have a hard time understanding how that works, because for us it was very organic. And so when someone leaves, or when someone decides that they're going to start a startup before they have an actual problem that they're solving, it's, and by no means am I saying they shouldn't do that, or I have no idea whether or not that's a good idea or not. But I just have a very tough time even fathoming that, because our baseline was so organic based on problems that we were experiencing and problems that we were solving.
It just made sense.
It just made sense.
Any other advice you want to share with founders?
I think I learned a bit earlier on, and I had the benefit of seeing a few friends who were kind of in stages that are a bit more advanced than where I was. A lot of times I see people put the cart before the horse in terms of building the company. And, everyone wants a big startup. I think a lot of people want a big company, and they want to, and that's a great aspiration to have. But something that I've learned early on, and look, we're still building, so, I don't know what's right or wrong, but was not pretending to be a company before they actually are a company. And that's something, I learned, where it's not things, sometimes it's better to just let things happen organically. You'll know when you need to hire people. When I first started, I thought that I needed to hire people because that was the thing to do, and I needed to hire someone in this role or that role, and that was just what everyone did. But I think what ends up happening is and I think a lot of founders do that, is that they just overhire and before they need to. But I think over time you realize, and thankfully we didn't do any of that. Even though I thought that's what we had to do at first, but then I had the benefit of some friends who were
Interesting.
doing that.
I think every startup founder, like first time founder, makes that mistake of
Yeah.
like, oh, like the bigger the company, the more success, or the more structured it is, it sounds more successful.
Yeah,
It sounds more organized, so it must be successful. Where at the end of the day, it's just how much revenue is coming in.
exactly.
The rest of it is just
Yeah.
the steps to make that happen.
Well, I think you just brought up a really good point, and the key word there was structure. I think it's good to be organized, obviously, and have some structure, but it doesn't have to be, you don't have to spend so much time on putting up the infrastructure.
Yeah, I think there is like an industry. I don't want to say like snake oil industry, but there's an industry of like consultants that come from successful companies, and then they try to apply the same practices to like a startup. It's like, oh, like you need this HR, processes. Oh, you need these sales processes, like, because that's what the successful companies do.
Mm-hmm.
But then that ends up, completely breaking the startup, like, completely making them unable to move fast and innovate and change direction quickly.
Exactly.
And it makes, especially like first time founder, I remember being a first time founder, and it's like, I really know we shouldn't do this. I feel like we shouldn't do this, but I'm not trusting these consultants we've brought in to help us, put these things in place. So I must be the one who's wrong. And that's sort of being like, sort of not naive, but like not having confidence in yourself as a founder, as a first time founder, which I think comes with age too, like being like, I don't know, 22 or whatever.
Yeah.
I see that a lot.
I also got, so it's along the same theme, which is a lot of founders also think that bringing advisors is going to somehow elevate their pitch deck when they're going out and raising, where they can show, we have a team of 6 advisors or however many advisors that are going to help. And I remember talking to my friend Eli, who's a successful founder. He's had an exit. He's on his second startup, and I was having drinks with him, and he said, and I was actually thinking about asking him to be an advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd actually that was what the meeting was about, where I was asking him to be an advisor. And he's like, look, I'll take the free shares if you want to give them to me, but I can tell you, I'm not going to add any value, just like any advice. There's like no other advisor's going to add any value. He's like, I'm happy to just do this for you. I'm happy to talk to you whenever you want without anything, just because I like you and I enjoy doing this stuff.
This is so funny. So January, like last month, we're like, we need advisors. and I agree with what you mentioned, but I'm like, I need some external force because we don't have VCs. So I'm like, let me go talk to that guy. And Jack, who runs the Scaling DevTools podcast, I talked to Jack, and he's like, listen, let's just meet a few times, before, you give out any shares or you make it formal. I was like, oh, really appreciate it. And I realized like the people who are, actually really interested in helping you would help you anyways.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing I learned with advisors generally is that, there's so much advice you can get from one person, right? So there's sort of, I feel like there's an expiration date. Either your company doesn't move anywhere or you move into another problem that requires another set of advisors, So
yeah,
totally makes sense.
Well, there's no shortage of information.
Yeah.
And all of us are over-indexed on consuming information and under-indexed on actually taking action on that information. If you, I don't care who you are, you're guilty of scrolling on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Stop listening to this podcast. Go build your startup.
Exactly. But we're all guilty of that, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we're consuming information, and a lot of times we justify it. And look, there is good information out there. I take screenshots and I save it in my notes, and there's quite a bit that I've learned from it, and new ideas or validation of existing ideas. It's good reminders. Like all of that's fine, but there's a lot of information out there, and we're constantly consuming it. But how often we actually act, I think we're severely under-indexed on that. So it's better to, an advisor is just adding another stream of
More
information.
Yeah.
Unless that advisor is actually, you should, instead of advisors, you should have executors, right? Like maybe, but I guess those are just employees.
Yeah.
Where you actually pay them and they're executing. But the key there is having employees who are putting in more value than they're taking.
I think advisors make sense when it's really, really like whatever you're trying to solve, like that person has solved like 10 times before or has seen it like 100 times before. So it's not like, oh, it's just another founder, or especially in like a different industry, but it's like, oh, it's a founder maybe in this space who's done something in this space like 5 times for the past 20 years. And like then it's like, okay, there's a well of information for you. But then, yeah, information, like we had one meeting with Jack, and again, thank you, Jack. And I think that's enough for us to go on for like the next 8 months off of just the information in that, couple hour meeting. Like how much, can you take and act on? Like the bottleneck is the execution.
Yeah. But then I'd question, why not just pay them for
I really tried.
session.
He said no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like the people who want to help you would be like, just like,
yeah,
here you go.
Exactly. That's, I mean, right now we're going through a process of some compliance, some payments and integrating with the bank and some stuff around compliance for processing payments.
What was that called? There's a term, PCI? Is that PCI or something like that?
Well, I don't, this isn't that. It's just more, having just a framework for a compliance framework for being able to work with another payment processor that we're bringing onto our platform that users are going to be able to process payments through. And for that, obviously we don't need someone full time, so we just hired a consultant to go and help us figure that entire process out from start to finish. Because ultimately, could I have done it? Maybe, yeah. I'm pretty sure I could have, but I would have struggled with it, and I would have spent 10 times as much time as it would take this person to do it. So we just pay him, and he just does the work. But he's actually doing the work. He's writing the compliance documents and helping us put all those things in place. He's not an advisor where I think I think before, if I was earlier in my journey, I probably would have thought to bring on an advisor so that they can do this on an ongoing basis. And I think often what would most likely happen is that advisor would come in and tell me what I need to do, and I would still have to go do it. Right? Whereas in this case, I'm like, whatever your rate is, I'll pay you that. You just do it.
Got it. That's pretty good. Yeah. That's solid advice.
But maybe not everyone has the luxury of being able to pay.
I think it's more than it. It's like, I feel like early stage founders, maybe there is this, we make bigger deals out of issues, some issues that we're not familiar with, like compliance, like I need I need a security advisor. And then after, a few years later, when you look back, it's like, oh, that was like a 2 months project,
Yeah.
and it was fine. And
Yeah. Because when you don't know something, you just, it's overwhelming, right? But when you're familiar with it, then you realize the world around us was built by people just like us. So none of this stuff is rocket science.
that's true. I want to talk a little about your background, how you got into maybe thinking about starting a startup. You said it was organic, but when did you realize you're maybe interested in tech, in leaving finance? I don't think I've seen many people leave finance for tech. If anything, it's usually the reverse. Like tech people do an exit, become like VCs or investors, right? So I'd like to hear your thoughts a little about that. Like, how does that feel? How does that transition feel? And how is it like different, like you think, managing a tech company versus a, financial company?
I think it depends on your motivations. I would say that my patience is slightly above average. I'm more patient. I'm slightly more patient than the average person, and that translates into delayed gratification. And I think in finance, you have in a lot of cases, you have instant gratification where if you're working a finance job, it tends to be a high paying job, and every year you're making a lot of money. And so, the cash flows as an individual on a personal level are pretty good.
And you're not happy with that.
on a year over year basis. But I think I care less about the near term reward, and I'm quite okay with having delayed gratification, investing in the short term and making sacrifices, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
Although I don't really see them as sacrifices, I quite enjoy the process of it all. And so, but to some degree, yeah, I guess you could say if, when you're weighing two choices, then maybe one is a sacrifice, having a career in finance, or even, having a lending business, versus having a software business, which requires a massive amount of CapEx before it's cash flow positive. So, I'd say that it doesn't change my life dramatically, one way or another. So I think it's more of a personality thing.
Yeah. Okay. So you had an interest in like solving this problem, and it made sense for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I tend to have a super long-term vision. I could see myself at baseline 30 years from now.
Can I ask what that is?
Which is,
how do you see your life, at like, 70, 80, like why are you doing baseline essentially?
Yeah. I mean, I guess 70 would be 35 years from now. I guess not too far off, but yeah. I know my role will obviously evolve, but either way, I want to keep working until I'm 100 or whatever.
You're building a business you would enjoy working in. Is
yes.
That it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't see myself not enjoying working or not doing something. And I think for me, baseline could be that thing that I just do forever and hopefully become really good at over time and just continue to get better and better at it.
That sounds very good.
Yeah.
That sounds very relaxing.
Yeah, I don't have to
I'm just
pivot.
Yeah, no, it feels pretty cool. I think I see that in a lot of founders though. Like, I think a lot of founders lose that too, especially with like just listening too much to the outside. They forget that they're supposed to kind of enjoy this and like build an environment they enjoy. So I really appreciate hearing that.
Yeah. Maybe not enough founders actually vocalize it because they
Lifestyle business.
Well, it's not necessarily that, but it's also that, your investors, and look, we're VC backed. So, our investors invested in us because they're looking for an exit, right? But I think sometimes founders can maybe conflate the two, which is you can still give your investors an exit through other liquidity events.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, right? And by the way, you can also have liquidity events. You can have certain liquidity events yourself if you really want to, but obviously not divest your entire position in your company and still have a significant role to play in your company. And I think that sometimes founders are afraid to, if they really feel passionate about it, but they want to go and about what they're doing, but they want to go and raise VC money and they want to have investors, they want to tell those investors that they're going to exit, and because they think that's what investors want to hear. Maybe some investors do want to hear that.
Absolutely.
But I told my investors that I'm all for creating liquidity events for them when the time is right and when the time comes. But I can see myself in this business for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes years and years to really specialize and become the best in the world or one of the best in the world at something. So why not just continue to put yourself in a better and better position?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I do agree that there are investors who are probably, I guess they were bitten before, by this. They're afraid. I think they're scared of hearing the words like, "Oh, I want to build this business."
Yeah.
I want to build a big business. They feel like that's somehow, the same as like, I want to have a lifestyle business and get a paycheck, sort of. But anyway, moving on from that, I want to hear about your plans for Baseline. So you mentioned you want to raise a Series A expansion, I assume?
Yes. Last year we had 300% growth, which was pretty exciting and is exciting.
Yeah.
And we're tracking pretty nicely to the goals that we had set for ourselves and the milestones that I believe we have that we need to hit before we can do our next round of funding, which would be a Series A. So we're now in the, now I feel like there are some real problems. Now I feel like there's some real, there's a real use for hiring certain people with certain skill sets.
Like what?
So we're hiring for, so far, we've been, every single person on our team is on either engineering or customer success. And we've, it's been a founder-led sales model that we followed.
You've been marketer and sales.
Exactly. Obviously I have help from other members of the team too in those areas. We've, our product designer also helps with marketing design. And so I'm not totally alone in it, but I think now we're getting to the point where everyone needs a little bit of help. So we just hired someone in customer success, and I'm in the process of hiring business development reps, marketing managers, or marketing manager.
More on the growth side.
More on the growth side. Although, with that, with a growing customer base, we also need to hire more engineers. So that's, we're not stopping, or we're not going to stop hiring engineers. We're going to grow the engineering team too, but we're also going to focus on growing our sales and marketing functions.
That's pretty cool. What kind of team is Baseline? Like, what type of people would do best in Baseline?
It's a good question. We all have different backgrounds, so it's tough to really say there's one type of person. But I guess some of the common characteristics that we have, everyone enjoys being collaborative and in person, which is rare in this day and age. We're in the office every day, so we have a team that's working pretty closely, and I think we've just attracted people who enjoy being in person and working in the office. So that's one. We've also hired people with experience. So not, everyone on the team has like 8 to 10 years of experience. Now we've started hiring some more junior people, but that was the founding team was all pretty senior people.
That's pretty cool. It's like a very core group of, very passionate and driven people that drive results, right? That's the type of sort of core team you built.
For sure. And, these are people that could have been managers at Google or Meta or Apple, but, they want to be individual contributors, and they want to be at a super early stage startup. At least they wanted to be. Now we're moving from super early stage to maybe early stage. As we grow. But yeah, I think these are all people that are senior people who want to continue to be individual contributors.
Congrats. Really appreciate you being here and answering my questions, having this conversation.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
I'd love to talk to you, when maybe you're raising, or if you raise the next round, and
sure,
see what's new with Baseline.
Yeah.
Super excited.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the drinks.
I wanna give you some bad advice. You heard it right, bad advice.